it didn't take a couple of years. The moment she realized that what she was telling herself was false, in that very moment, her depression disappeared. That's the whole picture of cognitive therapy. But
Yeah.
it's hard for people to see this because you don't realize that your thoughts are creating your depression, your hopelessness, your anxiety, your anger, or whatever. And in addition, you don't realize that these thoughts are distorted because you'll think they're as true as the fact that there's skin on your hands. You think it's true that you really are worthless, you really are hopeless, you really are an inferior human being. And so it takes quite a bit of firepower.
Before we get started, I want to let you know about a resource that I made for you, especially if you've been suffering from things like anxiety and stress, mood problems, brain fog and racing thoughts, sleeplessness, low energy, and even chronic pain. I've put together a full collection of easy-to-follow tutorials and audio tools that use the power of sound to help you feel better every day, guaranteed. I call it the Donovan Healing Circle, and it's kind of like having your own digital medicine cabinet full of sound supplements. When you become a subscriber, you'll receive unlimited access to an entire suite of easy-to-follow tutorials, audio tools, research reports, plus my brand new ebook, Whole Life Sound Healing. Just visit donovanhealth.com to get started. That's donovanhealth.com. Hey there, this is Jim Donovan. Welcome to the show. I am so glad that you're here today. We've got a very special guest. I'm so honored to have him on the show, Dr. David Burns. He's an internationally renowned psychiatrist and an adjunct professor emeritus in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the Stanford University School of Medicine. He's also the New York Times bestselling author of Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy, among many others. Dr. Burns was also a pioneer in the development of cognitive therapy and is the founder and the creator of the new TEAM-CBT, which makes ultra-rapid recovery from depression and anxiety possible. So excited for this interview. Let's get started. Dr. Burns, so nice to see you. So nice to meet you. Thank you for agreeing to be on the show. How are you doing today?
Great, and I'm thrilled to be on your show, honored, and really want to thank you and appreciate this opportunity.
It's really my pleasure. You've done decades of research. You've written so many books, some bestsellers, and you're one of the pioneers in the development of cognitive therapy. You've taught thousands of people. You've got this brand new book that we're going to talk about today.
Feeling Great's the name of the book.
Feeling Great, excellent. So, you're a force of nature.
Thank you.
You've done so much in the field, and I'm just wondering, like what drives you to dedicate so much of your life to your work?
Well, I've always been really excited about helping people change. When I was a medical student, they used to have this kooky thing called psychodrama marathons.
Okay.
And I wasn't a very good medical student. I never should have gone to medical school, actually. I should have gone to psychology graduate school. But at any rate, I ended up at Stanford Medical School, but I would go to these psychodrama marathons where they'd put people in a house for 48 hours and confront people, and you'd cry, and then they'd throw you in the air, and there'd be music, which is your area, fantastic music that would be really zoned in on exactly what their weekness was. And those were beautiful experiences because you could see people changing in brief periods of time, and really dramatic changes, going from really feeling like they weren't any good to, then sobbing and suddenly finding incredible joy. And I saw that rapid recovery was possible. Now, psychodrama was kind of reckless, and so it faded from popularity, but I never forgot that, and I was always yearning to have that experience, and I think that's really driven me my entire career. After my residency, I finished medical school at Stanford, then finished my residency at University of Pennsylvania Medical School, and I got into all the stuff that was popular in psychiatry, like we were told it's a chemical imbalance in your brain that causes depression and you have to use these medications.
Right.
But the research I was doing, and I was winning awards for my research, showed that the chemical imbalance theory was not true. It was a fake theory. There was never any evidence for it. And today, finally, people are finally accepting the results of research we published even in the 1970s, showing that depression was not due, in fact, to this chemical imbalance with too little serotonin in the brain. That was a fake, wrong theory. And then I was giving out pills by the bushels full to depressed people. And I would go to conferences, and sponsored by the American Psychiatric Association. You'd go to some session by a drug company with free gourmet food, and there'd be 1,000 psychiatrists in the audience, and they say, oh, we have this new drug and Prozac, and it's going to cure 85% of depression. And then I'd go and I'd be giving it out to hundreds of people, and almost no one was getting better. And I said that there's something rotten in Denmark here. This is not on the up and up. This doesn't add up. Occasionally people got better from antidepressants, but there weren't a whole lot. And I've prescribed them on 13,000 occasions. And I never saw much from them. And then I heard about this kooky new approach that sounded stupid to me when I first heard about it, that Aaron Beck had developed, and Albert Ellis in New York, two very famous mental health professionals from the 20th century.
Right.
And they were saying that your thoughts cause depression. And that when you're depressed, you're telling yourself your thoughts don't make sense. They're not valid. They're distorted. They have thinking errors. Like you're saying, I'm worthless. I'm no good. I'll be depressed forever. I'm not as good as I should be. Why am I so screwed up? You know, things like that. And that when you change the way you think, you can change the way you feel. And I said, that is the most stupid sounding thing I ever heard. You can't change serious suicidal depression by having people think positive thoughts.
Right.
So I started going to this seminar that Beck gave at Penn Medical School every week. And I said, I'll just try these techniques with my worst patients, my most severe patients, and prove that they won't work. And then I started using the techniques, and patients started recovering. It was mind-blowing. And they said, we want more of these techniques that you're learning. And every week I'd go to a seminar and learn a new technique, and then use it on a number of my really patients who had been, made suicide attempts, and people who felt like they weren't any good. And it just blew my mind to see people like I had seen in psychodrama recovering really rapidly and completely. And I said, I've got to write a book about this and share the good news. And that's why I wrote Feeling Good. And when I wrote Feeling Good, it was what we were calling cognitive therapy was unknown. There was only about a dozen of us in the world.
Yeah.
And we were considered quacks. The psychiatrist wouldn't accept what we were doing, and the psychoanalysts wouldn't accept it. It just seemed everyone was turned off. But Feeling Good started selling and eventually made it to the top of the bestseller list, and really put cognitive therapy on the map all around the world. And cognitive therapy became the most popular form of psychotherapy in the world, and still is, and the most researched. And so I just left the university. I had a grant to do all this research on brain chemistry that I knew was going to be a waste of time. And I said, I want to develop this because I like to see people change. And that was the origin of the story. And then the latest thing is, now with my group at Stanford, we've developed even more powerful techniques to help people change rapidly.
Yeah.
And so that's really the story of my career, is looking always to find fast, quick, drug-free methods to help people change the way they feel. And it's been a fantastic adventure, and it's been incredibly exciting.
And and so many people that I know, including members of my own family, have benefited from that work greatly. It's not a stretch for me to say that work has given them their lives back.
Oh, and thank you.
I mean that with all of my heart. To see people that you love in a bad way and seemingly have no hope to come out on the other side, like brand new again is
Yeah,
just
it's mind blowing. And
mind blowing.
that's why I'm addicted to doing therapy, because now I can see that quickly, often in a single 2 hour session. The first time I sit down with someone, I most of the time I see full recovery now in 2 hours, which I would have thought impossible even 20 years ago. And when the patient, like what you just said, goes from hopeless and sobbing at the start of the session to joy and laughter at the end of the session,
Yeah.
it's like being on a rocket ship, and it makes me high. I get high at the same time my patients get high. It's the greatest experience in the world. The greatest gift that you can give someone is the gift of happiness.
Yes. I heard you say that there were people that, and I guess this happens all throughout medical history, where when the new thing comes out, the establishment goes, "No way, that can't possibly work." But yet, you are seeing people have experiences with some of the new techniques with depression. I wonder, could you describe to our listeners, in terms that anybody could understand, like what's an example of a technique that somebody might experience? Specifically some of the new things that you're doing. Is there a way to describe that we could understand, like one of them?
Well, sure. Yeah, I could either give you a great cognitive example from the early days of a woman who had attempted suicide and was referred to me.
Let's
Thought
do
she was
both.
a
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's start with her. Um, she was one of the ones, that I was going to practice these ridiculous techniques I was learning on, and she had been referred to me from the intensive care unit of the University of Pennsylvania Hospital. She was an elderly woman, although probably now my age, so I wouldn't say call her elderly anymore now that I'm 78 myself. But she was about the age I am now, and she had attempted suicide. She was from Latvia. She was
Mhm.
an immigrant,
Yeah.
and she survived. And then she was referred to me for treatment, for follow-up. And I was doing the thing I'd been trained to do as a psychiatric resident, is prescribe antidepressants and just ask her to share her feelings. And like most of my patients, nothing was changing.
Yeah.
So I presented her case to Dr. Beck and said, so how would I treat her with this new cognitive therapy, the idea that your thoughts create your depression? And he said, well, just ask her what she was thinking when she attempted suicide.
Okay.
And so I said, well, that makes sense. So I went and asked her, and she said, oh, well, I was telling myself, Dr. Burns, I was a worthless human being because I've never accomplished anything meaningful in my life. And that's one of the thought patterns that causes depression, is I'm not successful enough. The other one is I'm not loved, so I'm
Yeah.
worthless. People say I need love or success to be worthwhile. So she said, so what am I supposed to do about it? And I said, well, I don't know. If you wait another week, I'll present it at the seminar again, and I'll tell you next week. So I said to Dr. Beck, and she was fine with that. And so he said, well, ask her, use a technique called examine the evidence. And this is a technique that anyone can use.
Yeah.
And ask her to write down 5 things she has accomplished. I said,
Uh-huh.
oh, that's logical. So I told her that at the next session. She says, well, that's just the problem, Dr. Burns. I haven't accomplished anything.
Okay.
And I said, well, take it as a homework assignment then. Maybe you can think of something between now and next week, because I didn't know what to do either. I was stumped. And that's the thing about depression. You hypnotize the people around you into believing things that aren't true. Not only are you believing things that aren't true, but you get everyone else to believing it. So she had kind of stumped me. I thought, gosh, she's probably never accomplished anything. And then the next week she came back, and I did my normal thing. How's your dose of your antidepressant? Do you need a refill? Should I change the dose? And then tell me how you've been feeling. And I forgot the assignment. And halfway through the session, she said, didn't you want to see my list? And I said, oh, I forgot. Were you able to come up with anything? And then she handed me this list. And as I read it, tears started going down my cheeks. The first one, and she said, I overlooked the fact that I smuggled my children out of Nazi Germany
Oh man.
and got them to the United States. My husband and all of the rest of my family died in the concentration camps.
Mm.
So I thought
Wow.
maybe that was a bit of an accomplishment.
I'd say.
And then she said, and I kind of overlooked the fact that my oldest son just graduated first in his class at the Harvard Business School.
Oh my
And
God.
maybe that was something to be proud of. And also I thought when I got to the new country, I spent my life scrubbing floors and cleaning people's houses so that my children and I could have a roof over our heads and food to eat. And I thought, well, maybe that was an accomplishment of sorts. And then I forgot that I'm a gourmet chef, so I added that to my list. And also, I speak 5 foreign languages fluently,
What?
and all of this stuff, and I couldn't believe it. And I was just looking at her, and on the verge of tears hearing this stuff.
My God.
And then I said, "How do you reconcile this with your belief that you're a worthless human being who's never accomplished anything?" And she's looked at me. She says, "Dr. Burns, it doesn't make sense. I don't know how I could have been thinking that."
Mm.
And then I said, "Well, how are you feeling now?" And she said, "I'm feeling a lot better. Do you have some more of those techniques for me?" And I said, "Well, you have to wait another week. That's the only one I've
Next week.
learned. I'll learn another one this week." And that's how it went in the early days. And those changes stuck with people, and they were profound. She didn't just become less depressed; she became joyful.
Mm.
And I said, "This is what I've been looking for my whole life, is a way to make this happen that's safe and professional." Now so anyway, that's chapter one, and there's a chapter two as well.
Let me just insert right here. So
Yeah,
what I'm hearing you say is that for this particular case, the a quote unquote cure was a repatterning of the way she was thinking about herself.
that's correct. The cognitive idea goes back 2,000 years to the teachings of the Greek philosopher uh, Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher.
Yes.
People are disturbed not by things, but by the views we take of them. In other words, your thoughts create all of your feelings. It's the only cause, and it causes all of your emotions, what you're thinking in the here and now. And this is so simple and basic. Most people, even listening to the show right now, won't understand it. But it's like what you're telling yourself at this moment is creating your feelings at this moment. Like if you're listening to the show, you may be thinking, "Boy, that Burns sounds like a quack," or "He sounds like an ass," or "He sounds so arrogant," or whatever. Then you're going to be feeling ticked off.
Yeah.
Other people are going to be thinking, "Wow, this is something new, that you can be cured quickly of depression without antidepressants. This is awesome. This could help me." And then if you're thinking that way, you're going to feel happy and excited. Everyone's hearing the same show.
Right.
But if you have 10 people, they'll have 10 different kinds of reactions depending on your thoughts. And that's the first idea. Your thoughts create all of your emotions. And
Mm.
the second idea is that when you're depressed or anxious, you're telling yourself things that aren't true. I listed 10 thinking errors in my book, Feeling Good, that
Yeah.
cause all of depression and anxiety. But the idea of depression and anxiety are the world's oldest cons, that you're believing things that are fraudulent and untrue. When she was telling herself, "I've never accomplished anything uh, meaningful in my life," she was telling herself something that wasn't true.
Yeah.
Now, we're not blaming her for that at all.
No.
But the fantastic thing is, when you put the lie to those distorted thoughts, when you prove to yourself that they're not true, the very instant you stop believing them, you can change the way you feel. And her recovery happened just, you know, like in a couple of minutes. It didn't take a couple of years. The moment she realized that what she was telling herself was false, in that very moment, her depression disappeared. That's the whole picture of cognitive therapy. But
Yeah.
it's hard for people to see this because they don't realize, you don't realize that your thoughts are creating your depression, your hopelessness, your anxiety, your anger, or whatever. And in addition, you don't realize that these thoughts are distorted because you'll think they're as true as the fact that there's skin on your hands. You think it's true that you really are worthless, you really are hopeless, you really are an inferior human being. And so it takes quite a bit of firepower to reveal to people, to show people that their negative thoughts are really distorted and untrue. And I've developed over 100 techniques that I describe in my books, ways to crush these thoughts that rob you of joy and self-esteem.
Yeah. Well, let's go into that. Some of those newer ideas that you were talking about from your new book.
Yeah. Well, Freud had this idea that doesn't interest most people, if you're not a psychoanalyst, which I'm not, but that there's this thing called resistance, that
Okay.
we can get sucked into depression and anxiety and kind of resist change.
Right.
And so I saw this in the research on the treatment of depression, that there were all these schools of therapy that have been developed, cognitive therapy and all other different kinds of therapy. But in general, fewer than half of the people improve when treated with any form of psychotherapy. And it's even true of antidepressants. Fewer than half of the people who get antidepressants show any improvement at all. And that's generally just a placebo effect. And I saw that too in my practice. Some people would just pop like popcorn
Right.
and just recover like that woman, but others would kind of start yes-butting me and fighting me and not wanting to do their psychotherapy homework. And those were the ones who tended to improve much more slowly.
Mm.
And even in my book, Feeling Good, they did research that if you just hand my book, Feeling Good, to someone who's seeking treatment for depression and just say, you're going to have to be on a waiting list for 4 weeks before you can see your shrink, but read this book in the meantime, 2/3 of those people recovered just by reading the book.
Wow.
And didn't want or need any treatment. But I asked myself the question, but how about the third who didn't recover from reading Feeling Good? How are they different?
Yeah.
And I found in my research that Freud was right, that there is something called resistance, that people do fight against recovery in many cases. But what's really been cool is our whole new view that we've developed of depression, what causes depression and anxiety, and why people resist. You see, our society teaches people that if you're depressed, it's because there's something wrong with you, or if you have panic attacks or anxiety or whatever, social anxiety or whatever.
Well, broken.
Yeah, you're broken. You have a chemical imbalance in your brain, which has been shown not to be the case. Or you have a so-called mental disorder that you can look up in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the so-called DSM. You can find you probably have 5 different mental disorders.
Yeah.
Like for me, I found out I have 8 personality disorders, and I enjoy all of them, actually.
That work is what you got,
Yeah, right. Exactly. But what you have a personality defect, you've had traumatic events that have damaged you in your brain,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And these things make it seem like you're broken and defective and someone's got to fix you. And they make you feel ashamed. And what we've discovered, it's the other way around, that people get depressed and anxious not because of what's wrong with you, but because of what's right with you and what's most beautiful about you and your values, your core values as a human being, and that there are tremendous benefits for depression and anxiety. And when we reveal these things to patients, they suddenly become proud of their depression and anxiety. And I can give you an example.
Yes.
Instead of ashamed, and the moment that happens, their resistance to change suddenly disappears. And it takes about 20 minutes to do that. And then you can help them challenge the negative thoughts, and they can crush the negative thoughts instead of fighting. And the recovery happens really quickly. And that's how I can now get pretty much total recovery with almost everyone I see in a single session, because I have this new front end on eliminating therapeutic resistance. And the resistance is because of the patient's core values. Just to give you a simple example, I treated a woman in front of a live audience just to give a demonstration with this woman I'd never met, but she'd been suffering for 9 years because when her daughter was 12, she said, "Mommy, can I go out and play?" And the woman thought, oh, it's a little late, but she's been going out every night for like 8 years, so let her go. So she went outside, and then some neighborhood boys snuck up on her daughter, and they had a loaded high-powered pellet rifle.
Ah.
And they aimed it at her face from 1 foot away and pulled the trigger. And the bullet hit the tooth exploded. There was tremendous damage to the girl's mouth and face. And she ran inside screaming with blood gushing out of her mouth. And it was horrifying for Karen, my patient, as well as for her daughter,
Sure.
we'll call Ashley. And this led to 9 years of suffering for Ashley, multiple surgeries to repair the damage to her face, and 9 years of failed therapy for the daughter's anxiety and depression, her post-traumatic stress disorder. But the daughter didn't know that all this time Karen was suffering with extreme feelings of guilt and shame and depression and anger, and telling herself, I'm a failure as a mother. I never should have let her go out and play.
Yeah.
I've ruined her childhood. It would be morally wrong for me to be happy while my daughter's suffering. And she was also thinking the people in this audience right now are probably judging me and thinking I'm a bad mother as well. Now you can see all of her distorted thoughts,
Yes.
but before I helped her crush the thoughts, I had her, well, I actually did this thing called the magic button. I said, after I empathized with her, I said, now, Karen, what kind of help would you like in this session today? And she said, oh, well, it's probably impossible, but I'm just so tired of suffering. And if there's any way for me to get over this depression and guilt and shame and anxiety, that would be a miracle. And I said, well, suppose we have a magic button. If you just press it, you'll be instantly cured with no effort. And you'll go into a state of euphoria. Will you press it? And she said, oh, I'd press that magic button in a heartbeat. Everyone says that. Then I said, well, I'm not so sure it would be a good idea. I don't have a magic button, but I've got mind-blowing techniques. And I think I probably can make your depression disappear entirely today. But I don't think it's a good idea. She says, well, why not? If you've got the techniques, you've got to help me. I've been praying to God every night for 9 years, and I'm horribly depressed every minute of every day. Why won't you use your techniques? And I said, well, I'm not saying I won't, but we better first say, what is your depression and anxiety and rage and shame and guilt and hopelessness show about you as a human being that's positive and awesome? And I said, let's start out with your guilt. You're telling yourself you're a failure as a mother. What do those feelings show about you that's positive and awesome and beautiful? Can you think of anything, Jim?
That she cares.
Yeah. So I said, let's write that down. These thoughts show how much you care about your daughter. Is that true, Karen? She said, oh, absolutely. I love her tremendously. I said, is that important? She said, absolutely important. I said, is that powerful? She said, oh, it's the most powerful force in my life. So we put that on the list. I said, what else does it show about you, Karen, that's positive and awesome? And she said, well, maybe that I have high standards. And I said, sure, let's put that down, high standards. I said, do you have high standards? She said, oh, absolutely. I do everything I can for my daughter. And in my own career, I've gotten a PhD. I've developed a tremendous career for myself. Absolutely, I have high standards. And then what else do these thoughts show about you? Well, it shows that she's accountable. Rather than blaming the universe or blaming others, she's saying the buck stops here. And then also it shows that she's humble. And then her anxiety makes her vigilant to protect her daughter so she doesn't make that mistake again. And then her sadness, I said, now, Karen, if you press this magic button, you'll be euphoric. Is that what you want? You want to be euphoric about your daughter's suffering? She said, oh, I see what you mean. No, no, my depression is my love for my daughter. You see, so I'm helping her see that what society says is a symptom of a mental disorder is actually a manifestation of what's beautiful about her.
You're filling in the blanks. Like there are these gaps in every one of those issues, and
Yeah.
that filling of the gap is like making them whole in a way.
Yeah, yes, that's right. It's the beautifulness of her is why she's been suffering for 9 years.
That's
And it's,
brilliant.
yeah, isn't that, it's great. And patients love it because they've never thought of it this, like, it's like a light bulb goes on. And then I say, well, maybe we don't want to press that. Maybe we got a list of 25 things about her. Each one was jaw-dropping.
Wow.
And then say, maybe we don't want to press that magic button. How about if we had a magic dial, Karen, we could just dial it down a little bit? And that way you wouldn't, because if you press the button, all these positives about you are going to go down the toilet along with your negative feelings. But maybe we could dial your feelings down a bit. How depressed would you like to be at the end of today's session? Right now, you're 100. You're the most depressed a human being can be. What
Yeah.
would be appropriate amount? And she said, oh, 5%. And I said, are you sure that's enough? Could I sell you on 10% or 20%? She says, no, 5% is plenty of depression. So she wanted her depression to go to 5, and she wanted her anxiety to stay at 10, and he wanted her shame to go to 0. She dialed down all of these things. And at that point, her resistance was gone. And then I just used a few of the basic cognitive therapy techniques. She blew it out of the park. And at the end of the session, all of her feelings went to 0. They actually, some of them she estimated below 0. She said one of her negative feelings was down to minus 1,000, and another one went to minus 1,000,000. I mean, she was in a euphoric state. And that's what I like to see is a complete elimination of symptoms quickly, along with the development of joy. It's not about becoming a little less depressed. It's like finding like the meaning of your life. That was like 4 or 5 years ago, and I contacted her to get permission to use her story in my new book, Feeling Great, along with other similar inspiring stories, and to see how she was doing. And she just said, I haven't had a single therapy session since that day. The changes were monumental. I'm still feeling great today. And she said the neat thing is that I talked about the session with my daughter, and I actually gave her a recording because a friend recorded it.
Oh, wow.
And her daughter didn't know that her mother was depressed the whole time. And it just brought them so close together. And then she says her daughter miraculously recovered and had then completed graduate school to become a clinical social worker, has gotten married, and is doing great as well. But that's the new thing, and that's why I wrote Feeling Great, so people could use these techniques themselves to discover that your symptoms aren't because of what's wrong with you, because of what's right with you. And when people see that, it is mind blowing. So it's just another, I think, major breakthrough in the treatment of depression and anxiety.
It's wild. I'm sitting here. I've got goosebumps on my arms as we talk about this, and it makes me wonder. In your opinion, why do you think we resist? Like, why do we only seem to have one side of the story, almost like as a rule?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Well, because you see, she's resisting change because her symptoms are the expression of her core values. Do you see?
The part of her, I get. Yeah.
You see, she's depressed because she loves her daughter, and her daughter is suffering. And that's a beautiful thing for Karen to see. Do you
Yeah.
see? It's not a chemical imbalance in her brain. It's her love for her daughter. And when and her anxiety is her love for her daughter. She was angry too. And that was a great thing too. She's like a mama bear protecting her
Right.
cubs.
Of course.
And that she has the anger of a fighter, and the anger is justified because those boys' parents never should have let them go out playing with other children with a loaded rifle.
Right.
And so once she sees that she has nothing to be ashamed of, she has something to be proud of, the resistance disappears at that point. But we've been trained not to see this by society that keeps saying, oh, depression is some terrible thing, bad thing, it's a mental disorder. And then you start thinking about yourself in this highly negative way.
Yeah.
But the resistance happens because let's say a therapist comes in and tries to sell Karen on treatment. See, she will resist that treatment because she doesn't subconsciously doesn't want to let go of her depression, because then that means she'd be happy about her daughter's depression. So therapists who are trying to sell happiness will run into a wall of resistance from Karen unless you melt it away. And it's not because she's a whiny person who's trying to get attention the way we've been taught to believe. It's because of her love, because of her value systems that she's experiencing depression and anxiety and shame and anger and hopelessness.
So is it the same for someone, so we're in this time of pandemic. People are having all kinds of anxiety and depression. Are there similar messages happening for those folks?
Yeah, it's the same thing on my website, feelinggood.com. I've got the free Feeling Good podcast and a lot of free resources for people, by the way. That's one of my goals. I've got free depression classes and free anxiety classes and all kinds of stuff like that. But I have what I call Corona casts, which is a part of my weekly Feeling Good podcast, where I treat people live. I've on the podcast, so you can hear how the treatment actually works, so you can see it and believe it. In fact, all the patients in the book, if you want, you can actually hear the treatment of that person, so you find out the story in the book is true. It's not fake. You can hear the person recovering right before your ears, so to speak. But like in a Corona cast, I treated a fellow who said his life was going great, in spite of the Corona casts. That he said his life was going crappy, and then he got married and got divorced and lost his house, and his career was going down the drain, and he had to live with his mother. And then his mother got cancer and died. And oddly, right after she died, everything started working out for this guy. His career started blossoming. He met a beautiful young woman. They got married. They're happily married. They have a beautiful house. But he says every now and then he'll be hit like lightning, and he'll have the thought, and he'll crash. The moment he starts to get happy, he suddenly crashes.
Yeah.
And then he has thoughts like, how can I be happy when the world is suffering and people are dying all over the world?
Yeah, that's common.
Yeah, and it would be irresponsible. It would be immoral, really, for me to feel happy. And then again, this is typical of depression. It's a should statement. I should not feel happy. And it's also kind of distorted because, he's not causing all these deaths.
Right.
He's not to blame for the epidemic. But in addition to saying that, which was helpful to him, just like the woman from Latvia suddenly saw that her self-criticism wasn't valid, he also discovered that he hadn't really completely grieved his mother's death, and that was kind of, he was holding on to that, and that when I pointed that out, he began really sobbing during the session, and did that grieving, acknowledged to himself how much he loved his mother, as well as he had never grieved the death of his brother when they were growing up.
Oh, wow.
And he just did a lot of sobbing. And all of a sudden after that, he was able to crush his negative thoughts and say, this is ridiculous, that I'm not responsible for these deaths all over the world. It's okay to be sad about them, but I don't need to feel depressed or guilty or ashamed. And his his depression suddenly went away, and he's just still doing great. That was about 6 months ago, but I see him every week, not as a patient. It was just a one-shot treatment, but
Yeah.
he's just doing great. But it's the same thing when people are upset during an epidemic or during a political conflict. You have a right to be upset, and that's not unhealthy. You can be angry, you can be discouraged, you can be sad, you can be, appropriately anxious. But when people get really overwhelmed by negative emotions, it's you're always giving yourself these distorted messages. And the great news is you can change the way you feel really, really rapidly now.
Now, I'm hearing you say, part of the last gentleman's process wasn't just changing thoughts, but it was also having the emotional response that needed to happen that had been
Yeah,
maybe lingering and waiting to happen for permission.
yeah. And I call that the hidden emotion method.
Mm,
And you see it an awful lot in people who are anxious, like with panic attacks or obsessive compulsive disorder or phobias or chronic worrying. 80% of the time, there's something that's bugging them that they're not telling you about.
yeah.
And they're not hiding it, they just can't bring it to conscious awareness. But it's generally a problem in the here and now that they're thinking, I'm not supposed to feel this way for whatever reason. Like a woman was having panic attacks at work.
Yeah.
And every time her boss walked past her desk, she had the almost uncontrollable urge to vomit on him. and, and then she'd have to go home sick.
Yeah. I shouldn't laugh, but that's kind of funny.
Well, it was. And I said, well, are you upset about anything at work? Or maybe it sounds like maybe you don't like your boss, or you don't like. And she said, no, I love my boss. He's been so kind to me. He gives me promotions. He says I'm the top person in his company. And I said, well, I think there's something bugging you that you're not telling me about. And then about the third or fourth session, she said, something just crossed my mind that, ever since I've been a little girl, I've always wanted to have a career designing women's clothing. And I'm a great artist. I paint women's clothing all the time, but I'm working selling soda pop for this guy,
Mm,
wholesale soda pop business, and we're doing great. But I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. And that was, again, the hidden emotion that needed to come out before she could be cured of her panic attacks at work. And then I just said, tell your boss about the problem. Tell your husband about the problem. Tell your father about the husband, the problem. Tell your mom, and see what people think. And then she came back the next week, and she said, this is my last session. I'm cured. And I said, what happened? She said, well, I told my boss that this wasn't the career for me, but I would stay with him until he found someone to replace me, and I would make sure that person was fully trained.
mm,
But that, in 4 or 5, 6 weeks, I wanted to. I wanted out, but would always be. I told him I'd always be grateful to him. Always will admire him.
yeah.
And she said I felt such a relief. And that was the last time I ever saw her. But I got a card from her 6 months later. She said, I thought you might want to follow up. And she says, I just took 3 months off work because I've been working every summer, even when I was in high school, to earn money to help my family, waitressing work. I've never had a vacation.
Yeah.
So I just spent 3 months just hanging out in the backyard. And then I met a woman who manufactures women's clothing. And I got a job as an apprentice designing clothing.
Wow.
And I have never been as happy in my life. And it's just working out fantastic. And God bless you, Dr. Burns, and thank you. So that's just another one of the 100 techniques, but it's really a good one to know about, especially sometimes people are overly nice, develop anxiety disorders. And we have tons of techniques for treating anxiety exposure and cognitive techniques, but this hidden emotion technique is pretty mind-blowing.
It really is. I've experienced similar things, similar kinds of releases, and I can vouch for that. You know, I'd like to pivot to something that I've been thinking a lot about, and I bet that you're going to have some insight on this. I think it's obvious to a lot of folks that we are in an unprecedented time, specifically around the divisions that we're experiencing here in the States. And I know that speaking to people that you don't agree with is a skill set, right?
Yeah.
It can be challenging, and I know that you have something called the disarming technique, and I'm wondering if there's a way for people to learn how to do this, or even just know where to go to learn more about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can demonstrate it if you like, because it's
Yeah,
mind blowing. But it's like learning to play the piano. You can see a pianist playing a beautiful thing, say, "Oh, that's beautiful," and then you go up and start pounding on the keys, and it doesn't sound right.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I have a book that teaches people how to do this. It's called Feeling Good Together,
Feeling good
and
together.
it's a paperback you can get on Amazon. And if you do the written exercises in it, you can develop vastly superior communication techniques. But the disarming technique is when someone's criticizing you. Now, I train therapists in this a lot because we're always getting criticisms from our patients,
Sure.
but it could be a family situation too. And the idea behind it, and it's just one of 5 vitally important communication skills, but it's called the law of opposites. And the idea there is that when someone criticizes you with a criticism that seems irrational and unfair, if you defend yourself, which is what all humans do 100% of the time,
Right.
will prove that the criticism is valid and the conflict will escalate.
Yeah.
If in contrast, you genuinely agree with a false, unfair criticism and prove that it's true, the moment you do that, the other person will suddenly stop believing their criticism of you. It's a paradox. If you defend yourself, you'll confirm that they're right. If you agree with them, they'll conclude that they weren't right. And if we could just do a quick roll to demonstrate it. This might be
Sure.
simplest if you were my patient
Okay.
and you were ticked off, because we get written feedback from patients after every session, and we use very sensitive scales and that show when therapists fail. And I have a lot of failures, uh, and I have a lot of successes too, but I find out right away when I'm failing with a patient.
Yeah.
But let's say you're such a patient, Jim, and I just say, I see, Jim, at the end of last session, you wrote down pretty low empathy scores and pretty low helpfulness scores. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it sounds like I really missed the boat with you in our last session. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, really. I just didn't think that you heard me. I didn't feel like you really even knew what you were talking about, and I'm just not sure I even want to keep doing this.
Yeah, wow, that's painful. Uh, you're saying I didn't really hear what you were saying or tune into how you were feeling. That I didn't seem to know what I was talking about. I take the word seem out of there, because clearly I was missing the boat with you, and so much so that you're not even sure you want to continue. And let me say first that I'm really honored that you'd come back to even tell me that rather than just drop out. I have tremendous respect for you. And I also want you to know that we're on exactly the same page. I came to the same conclusions after last session, that I didn't listen well. I didn't hear or understand how you were feeling inside. And the comments and suggestions and tools, that I was talking about was a lot of wasted time, because I wasn't supporting you and tuning into you. And I want you to know I feel sad to hear that, and a little ashamed, because I like you so much, and I'm convinced that we can work together well. But I'd like to hear how angry you feel, how disappointed you feel, how let down you feel. And as painful as that might be and awkward for both of us, I think that conversation can deepen our relationship, so we can get this ship sailing in the right direction. And with that in mind, tell me more. We're on the same page, and I want to hear how you're thinking and feeling. How is that?
You're like an airbender. Like
Yeah,
it was like being in the Matrix, and you were going, "Whoa!"
yeah, right. And it's so exciting. But for the therapist to do this, you have to
Yeah. I mean,
check your ego at the door. And but it puts you on the same, you and the patient on the same page, and it's just so exciting to do that. And my philosophy is, your worst therapeutic failure is your greatest success in disguise. But
mm,
first of all, you've got to know that you're failing, because patients won't tell you. So that's why we use the feedback forms. They'll rate you low,
yeah,
and they'll write down what they're ticked off about. And then if you process that non-defensively, it can transform the therapeutic relationship. And you can do that with loved ones. You can or with anyone you're in conflict with, including someone political
mm,
that you're in conflict with. But the sad thing is, you have to want to develop a closer relationship with the person you're at odds with. And right now, our country is so polarized, almost like we've got two cults battling with each other.
yeah,
And there's a lot of hatred for the people in the other party. And so people are not, many are not wanting to develop a closer collaborative relationship. They want warring factions. They want to be at war. Human beings are attracted not only to love and joy and collaboration, but humans are also attracted to violence, to hatred, to exploitation, to looking down on others.
yeah,
Uh, so you can use the techniques in feeling good together in a political situation, if you want. But if you're not motivated to get close to the other person, no techniques in the world will be good enough. Now, Biden is really talking uh, collaboration, and let's move toward one nation again, with people who love and respect each other in spite of differences and belief in policies.
right.
And I'm hoping that tone can continue, because it's very frightening to me personally, and as an American, to be sensing this mutual uh, hatred, and the potential for violence and destabilization that can trigger.
Right, right. And what I'm hearing you say is that it has to start with an intention, like a
Yeah,
true intention that I truly want to do this, knowing that I can't control an outcome, but
right.
I have to start from there, because if it's just an empty conversation, then you might as well not have it.
That's right. If it doesn't come from a heart, it won't work. I had a woman who came to my workshop on the 5 secrets of effective communication, and then she came to the same workshop in another city a year later. And I said, "Well, I remember you from the first workshop, but it's great to see you again. Why are you coming to the same workshop again?" She said, "Well, I wanted to tell you something, that after the last workshop, I went home, and on the news it said there was a serial rapist in our town, and that each woman he raped, he would beat,
Mm.
and each one was worse than the one before. And the last one ended up in the intensive care unit, and there was an announcement that they predicted he would kill his next victim, rape and kill his next victim." And she said, the next day when I came home from work, there was a fellow in my apartment. And
Yeah.
that's the way he would go. He'd break into a woman's apartment, and he stuck a gun in my ribs, and said, "We're going to go and take money out of your instant cash machine." That's what he would do with his victims: take the money, take them to the woods, rape them, and then beat them. And she she got terrified, because she knew she was going to be his victim, the first one he was going to kill. And she talked to him using the 5 secrets of effective communication and expressed actual respect for him
Yeah.
and warmth, and that she wasn't judging him, but she was terrified.
Hmm.
And really tried to understand the world through his point of view. And they pulled up to a red light, and there was a police officer next door, a police car. And he looked to her, and there were tears going down his cheeks. And he said, maybe you better tell that police officer who I am. And she got out and said, this is the serial rapist.
Oh
And
my
the
God.
and the police officer went out. Went out and he put his hands up like this. And surrendered. But you can
Whoa.
do you can do tremendous things with the 5 secrets of effective communication. But in her case, she wanted to form a warm, loving relationship with this horribly aggressive man to save her life, and it worked. But if you don't want to get close to the other person, if you prefer warfare, and part of us as humans does to prefer battle. We want to do battle. We want to kill. We want to lash out. We want to get revenge.
Yeah.
Then all the tools in the world won't lead to a loving relationship.
Right. Yeah. It's a complex world, and yet some of these stories that we hear about, you can see what is possible
Yeah.
with some knowledge and some willingness and
Yeah.
attention.
Oh, yeah. Miracles are possible all the time. Uh,
And where do we find the 5 secrets of communication? What book is that?
Well, I mentioned it in the new one, Feeling Great, as well as in the first one, Feeling Good. But the book that's all about that is called Feeling Good Together. And it's a paperback you can get on Amazon or at any bookseller. And it's not that long of a book. Oh, yeah. If you get the book Feeling Good Together, do the written exercises, because that's like playing the piano, like
Yeah.
doing your practice. And you're not going to learn the piano without doing the practice. And you're not going to learn the 5 secrets without doing the written exercises while you read. But if you do the written exercises, you can do a great deal to change the way you communicate with other people and to develop better relationships, more loving relationships. They can have an almost magical effect once you get good at using them. But it will take some hard work and effort to learn them. If you're really hungry for it. I was hungry to learn it because I wasn't good at communicating. I was always a clever psychiatrist, but in the early days I didn't have that warmth. And so I really worked at first developing these tools and then practicing them until I got pretty darn good at them. And it's been changed my life. The disarming technique has really changed my life.
Wow, it's so valuable. I just cannot wait to dig into that. I'm going to be doing the written exercises,
Yeah.
and as a teacher myself, just to have some of these tools, and I just have to say that the generosity, the spirit of generosity that you have in just giving people these things in book form, and all the resources that you have on your website. And you said that's feelinggood.com?
Yeah, Feeling Good is one word with 2 G's in the middle. Feelinggood.com, www.feelinggood.com. And then you'll find the free depression class, the free anxiety class, the Feeling Good podcasts, my TED Talk, tons of stuff that's free of charge that can change your life. And I've had so many people write to me and say I'd had decades of failed therapy for depression. I've had electroconvulsive treatments. I've had all the antidepressant pills without effect. And
Right.
what I've learned in your Feeling Good podcast has cured me and transformed my life. And I get those every single day from people. So if you or someone who's suffering, and maybe doesn't have resources, or even someone who does, you can just go to feelinggood.com and click on the podcast link. You'll see all of the podcasts with links to the show notes, links to the audios, and that can be helpful to the general public as well as to mental health professionals who want to learn the new techniques.
And I really want everybody to hear this. I was on the website. You can check it out yourself. This isn't about. I mean, of course, David is selling books. It's his life's work, but this is not some sort of pyramid scheme thing where you get there and then you have to jump through all these hoops. I mean, the material's just there, and you can go check it out. And I really encourage anybody out there that's struggling with anxiety and depression, and just looking for some help from somebody who's been doing this for decades, who was at the forefront of cognitive therapy at the beginning. You're not going to find too many places that are this generous. So really check out feelinggood.com for that. I tell you what, I could keep talking with you for another 3 days or so. I'm sure you've got plenty of things that you've got to do. I'm wondering maybe we could pick up this conversation another time.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2. I'd love it. I love talking to you, and it's just so much fun.
Yeah, this is really exciting stuff, and I just love that. The spirit of this is that you're empowering people with what's already within them. You're not feeding them things that are things they have to consume, things that have extra side effects that then they have to take other medications to deal with those side effects. It's
yeah, I just hated that. I used to have to do that when in my psychopharmacology days, and I'm just glad I got out of that game. I've never been against medication. Sometimes they can be life-saving, but I just think it's great news that the vast majority of people struggling with depression and anxiety can be cured, and quickly, without having to be taking all of these pills or any pills at all.
Yeah, it's a really important thing to underline. When people talk about wellness, sometimes there are folks that are completely anti-Western medicine. That's not what I am. It doesn't sound like what you are either. But we're looking for what are the best practices for people who want to at least try these things.
Yeah.
And, my life has been saved by Western medicine and opiates and all the different things that I would never want to take, but when you have to, you have to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I am a physician. I'm not against medicine.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, anyway, it's refreshing to talk to you. I feel so lucky that we get to do this. I can't wait to do it again. And just one more time. So your book is Feeling Great.
Right.
And that is on feelinggood.com.
Yeah, the website is feelinggood.com and the book is Feeling Great.
Great. And then you can find that on Amazon and all of those places.
Absolutely.
I want to give you the last word and then we'll sign off.
My last word is you're awesome. It was great fun. I deeply appreciated it. And I'm excited and looking forward to chapter 2 in our work together.
That's great. Dr. Burns, thank you so much. Hang on the line here. I'm just going to sign off and we'll chat. And everybody out there listening, thank you again for tuning in. I really appreciate that you spent time with us today. And I will see you next time. Take good care of yourself. Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm wondering if you would do us a quick favor and follow, rate, and review the show. When you do that, it really helps us to spread the word. Also, come and visit us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Just search Jim Donovan Sound Health. Before you go, I want to let you know about a resource that I made for you, especially if you've been suffering from things like anxiety and stress, mood problems, brain fog and racing thoughts, sleeplessness, low energy, and even chronic pain. I've put together a full collection of easy-to-follow tutorials and audio tools that use the power of sound to help you feel better every day, guaranteed. I call it the Donovan Healing Circle, and it's kind of like having your own digital medicine cabinet full of sound supplements. When you become a subscriber, you'll receive unlimited access to an entire suite of easy-to-follow tutorials, audio tools, research reports, plus my brand new ebook, Whole Life Sound Healing. Just visit donovanhealth.com to get started. That's donovanhealth.com.